Ask Reddit asks lawyers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment in court?
Not oh shit bad. Oh shit, I can't believe she said that. First jury trial. Pretty serious charges. I'm cross-examining the alleged victim. And in answering my question she says, oh yeah, I lie all the time. Needless to say, I won that trial.
When I was 16, I tapped into a guy's bumper at a red light. Very minor impact. The car was almost completely stopped. I spent the next 5 years getting sued by this guy, who alleged all sorts of ridiculous injuries. When it finally came to trial, it somehow came out that the guy would take 3-mile walks. When he was on the stand, my attorney asked him if he was, in fact, able to walk for up to 3 miles. I can walk 10 miles. He bragged. Jury didn't give him a dime, and he had to pay court costs.
Reposting myself from years ago. Story from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court. Don't remember what he was charged with. The main witness for prosecution was on the stand, and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she couldn't identify him, he could probably get all charges dropped, as he was mentally adding this case to the WN file. He happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge facepalmed on that one.
Wouldn't the defendant be easy to identify because they're sitting at the table at the front of the courtroom with lawyers around them? Or did they have the defendant stand in a lineup or something?
Never ask a question to which you don't know the answer. Prosecutor suggested to me client that the canned goods he had burgled were to be used to trade for drugs. Me thinking the idea ludicrous asked my client whether he has ever traded food for drugs. To which he replied that he once exchanged a frozen chicken for heroin. Needless to say, I didn't win that one.
This is so true and sucks so bad in family court hearings because there's so rarely an opportunity to know how the witness is going to testify.
I'm guessing you learned that lesson that day.
Also, you can't legally tell them what to say, but you can go over hypothetical questions the prosecutor might ask and see how they'll answer.
Saturday in the public gallery at a bail hearing for a man accused of heinous crimes against a very young female relative. The judge started laying out the conditions of bail and one of them was to surrender his passport. Man turned to his attorney and said, loudly, words to the effect of, but you said I could fly back to my home country. The judge stopped himself and revoked the man's bail. And #X200B, edit. This post brought to you by the words, flight, and risk. Also, his home country was out of reach of extradition. Edit again. This was not in the USA. Every country has foreigners.
A lawyer I used to know was in court on a work injury case. The judge asked his client, just what is the nature of your injury? His client replied, I can't raise my arm this high anymore. While she raised her arm up to show just how high she couldn't raise it.
My mill did that once at a family gathering to prove she has neuropathy. Everyone exchanged confused looks and tried desperately not to laugh because it's well known that she's pretending to fuel her opioid addiction.
OMG, that's fucking gold. Case dismissed.
Maybe she actually meant higher than that anymore?
What if that was a lie? How? Mr. Fancy Lawyer Man.
Lol, great. That's perjury.
Spare me your big college words. All I want to know is if juror number 6 knows how many guns I own.
Spare me your big college words. It stands for laugh out loud. Duh.
I was prosecuting a contempt action in family court, something that basically never works, and everyone in the room could tell I was winning. The other side was unprepared, out of arrogance, and I was basically ripping this guy to shreds on cross-examination, which his lawyer didn't even think would happen, because he expected the case to be dismissed. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled for me and stated that she found the defendant's testimony to be untrustworthy. I was shocked at winning a contempt trial to begin with. But then this exchange happened. Defendant's attorney: Your Honor, now that you have found my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, I am requesting a continuance in order to prepare further witnesses. This concept is shocking in and of itself. Because to even think you can bring more witnesses after you rest your case is laughable. Judge: You had your shot and you missed. Counsel. Defendant's attorney: Your Honor, there was no way I could have anticipated that you'd find my client's testimony untrustworthy, and as such, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare other witnesses in support of his position. Judge: That may be an argument for your carrier. Counsel. But it holds no water with me. See you this afternoon for sentencing. For those who didn't pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer on the record in front of his client that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he fucked up so royally. That shit was mind-blowing on multiple levels.
I was the defendant, representing a non-profit that I volunteered for. The plaintiff was a 60-something grandma who was looking for a retirement settlement after falling out of her jacked-up pickup truck in our parking lot. The premise of her case was that our parking lot was in bad shape, and that she fell into a pothole and broke her leg, which resulted in her having to take Coumadin and diminished her enjoyment of salads at the Friday night fish fry. No. Really. It was going along fine. Until my lawyer put up a photo of the pothole, taken the day of the incident, filled to the brim with water, after a recent rain. He asked the lady if she had gotten her foot wet, to which she replied that she couldn't recall. He talked a little more about how perhaps if her foot wasn't wet, it might have been because she fell out of the truck and didn't really fall into the pothole. He asked again if her foot was wet, and she affirmed that yes, her foot was wet. The oh shit moment came when he went back to his desk, flipped through her deposition and read the part where she was extremely adamant that her foot wasn't wet. Then he did some fancy legal stuff. The case was thrown out and I went back to work.
I was the dumbass that almost screwed myself. I had 2 charges in 2 different courts. I accepted the first plea, which almost always carries probation, but my plea didn't have that condition. When it came time to accept the second plea, the prosecutor didn't include probation because she assumed my first charge put me on probation. She said as much to the judge, and me being a big dummy almost corrected her. My lawyer grabbed my shoulder and, I shit you not, told me to shut the fuck up. She doesn't know.
You almost became that kid that reminds the teacher about homework or an essay that's due.
Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
Opposing counsel was a nightmare. Everything late. His work was extremely subpar. And so forth. Accused me of lying multiple times when he had dropped the ball. During another hearing in which he did another dumb move, judge says, I'm glad you are the last case on the call. And all of the other attorneys have left the room. So they aren't here to hear me say that you are a terrible attorney.
I cover courts for a local paper, so I see a lot of cases. There are only 2 really bad lawyers I've seen that stand out. And one was almost exactly as you described. He would constantly get things wrong and then accuse the prosecutor of mixing things up to confuse the jury or whatever. I swear he appeared to be asleep at one point. Maybe his case was so bad he was angling for poor assistance of counsel. Who knows? But both were so terrible that I was shocked by A, their ages, as they had to have been doing it for some time, and B, their fucking gall. Like, both were just so brazen in court that it bordered on contempt.
Person I was representing was on trial for assault in the 3rd degree and DUI. In my state, A3 means you've assaulted an aid worker or police officer and is a felony. The allegations are that he was very verbally abusive to the officers and, at one point, kicked one in the face. We're sitting at the defendant's table and the officer is testifying about the statements my guy made to him, including some pretty horrific name-calling. Out of nowhere, my client screams, "You're a fucking liar. Fuck you, you son of a bitch!" Exclamation mark. Quote exclamation mark. We lost that trial. Another time, the judge asked a client whether anyone had coerced him into pleading guilty. And he said, yeah. My attorney. I about shit my pants. But he laughed and said, I'm joking. No. Are jokes like that taken at face value, or was the judge cool with it?
I was just interning in court during law school, but I'm a lawyer now. Fight in a club. Someone had broken someone else's jaw. And had 6 friends with him that insisted he had been identified wrongly because he never had a beard and the victim said he had a beard. They used a very specific phrasing to the tune of "my friend doesn't have facial hair because he is a professional in the food industry and it would go against the regulations." After 3 of the witnesses had repeated the same exact phrasing, the judge stopped one to ask if he knew what a couple of the terms in that line meant. And the witness couldn't explain it. Defense lawyer got busted for instructing the witnesses. She'd also gotten the defendant to reject a plea deal that exchanged prison time for a fine and community service.
You'd think that if she was coaching the witnesses, she'd have done so using what would appear to be natural phrasing for the group of friends, or at least just give them the bullet point version so they could say their bit without being direct repeats. Not that coaching them in the first place is okay. Of course, it's good that she got caught. But if you're going to break the rules, at least put some good effort into it.
I was at a hearing arguing that my client was wrongfully terminated because the employer failed to abide by the proper procedures.
During the hearing, a witness for the employer tried to offer documents that were fraudulently altered in order to make it look like the proper procedure was followed.
I noticed the alteration.
Opposing counsel quickly got that witness out of the room.
And after a quick adjournment, my client got a large settlement.
Was the alteration that obvious?
It was an age discrimination case. It wasn't a very strong case. But one of our arguments was that my client's supervisor railroaded him by terminating him without following the proper procedures. This employer, a government entity, is supposed to give its employees certain number of days of advanced notice before a termination. During discovery, the employer disclosed documents that indicated that they didn't give the client proper advanced notice. During the hearing, the witness shows up with the same paperwork, but with completely different dates, indicating that they did give him the proper notice. The alteration was obvious to me because I was going to examine that witness as to the date. So once I looked at the document she was giving me, it was obvious that something was wrong. Their lawyer had earlier given me an entirely different set of documents. I should mention that this was a hearing before a civil service commission and not an Article 8 court. So discovery was a little less rigid. Anyways, their forgery turned a weak case into a strong case.
Watching a hearing when the defendant said, I did stab her. But it was a gentle stabbing.
Reminds me of something I read on here where the person said, I hit her with a knife. Stabbing. That's called stabbing. My aunt was prosecuting a guy for AGG robbery one time, and when the victim showed the jury how the defendant had pointed a gun at her,
the defendant jumped up and shouted, "You lie. I didn't hold it like that. I held it like this."
Apparently, he had held it sideways like a gangster and didn't want the jury to get the wrong idea.
Not exactly in court, but I was defending a juvenile robbery case, where there was very little evidence. There was supposed to be 2 guys, but they only picked up this one kid. He had no stolen property on him. He was picked up like outside his own house, wearing different clothes than the victim had initially said. This kid was on the honor roll at school. His family seemed kind and were involved. He wrote poetry and played instruments. I actually believed it was a legit mistaken identity case. I went to meet with one of the kid's mentors for a character reference, and he exactly matched the description of the other robber.
So the homie roll kid was a robber too then?
So how did it play out?
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support the channel, and above all, have an excellent day, you incredible people.